Well, hello. I'm so glad that each and every one of you could join me today. You know, it's been a few weeks since I was able to jump on here and actually just talk to y'all, but I wanted to take a minute, and by that I mean probably like 45 minutes, to just talk about the wonders of blades. Yes! I've got Japanese steel and cutlery in my hands, and that's because I had an experience. Like, I went through some stuff over the last couple weeks, and I can't even start to articulate the wonders of what it has done in me. I got a chance to go to a class in the Pacific Northwest, which is an area I've only been once, and it was ridiculously rainy and cold and wonderful, but terrifying. There's so much gray. People talked about these legendary mountains that were hiding in the midst of the mountains. I was the person in the mountains hiding in the midst, and it was crazy beautiful. And so much water. Y'all are rich in water and trees, which is awesome, and they're gigantic. And Usnea was raining out of the sky. If you don't know about Usnea, Usnea, it's one of the most powerful natural medicines, and it hangs like moss off of everything that's wet and decomposing and full of life still. Check it out. Put it in your body. It'll change you. Anyways, I am going to be uploading videos over the next few weeks of this experience of this class that I got to take, which was on artisanal butchering. Butchering, not like modernity. This is like the old ways. Do you know what I mean? Maybe not. Some of you have probably no interest whatsoever in this topic, and I'm totally comfortable with that. You can click away now if you want to, but I challenge you to learn the way of the blade and the fundamentals that go into creating culinary delights from livestock, from animals. This class was specifically on lambs, and I'm a shepherd of lambs. Right now, I think in the flock, there's about as many sheep as are in that paleo alphabet, 22-ish letters. There's more growing in the wombs of those sheep, so I'm going to be busy this winter. But I had to learn how to butcher them because I know there's a growing number of you who are actually seriously, intentionally trying to set yourselves apart from eating the ways that this world, or maybe the way you inherited growing up eating, because you came to learn like there's poisons in the pot. You know what I mean? Like the dish is poisoned, y'all. There's a lot of nightmares in every single bite that we take. And this whole world system is designed in many ways to facilitate us eating death. Like, it's the beginning. It was the first strategy of the dragon, was to give us something that was pleasing to our eyes, to like allure us with that which is death. But maybe if he could convince us to just try it a little bit, it would change us into something like he is or the gods are kind of concept. The world is surrounded with that kind of ideology pervading it. And my wife and I really started on this kind of quest of truth and understanding when we started eating real food and drinking real water. That was like the base level for us. That's why we got fanatically obsessed with living water and living breads and living fabrics like linen and wool and silk. And we got obsessed with living authentically, like as close to the creation as we could possibly do. And for the last few years, that meant I lived on farms that grew produce. I had one experience as a goat shepherd where I was drinking buckets of milk on a regular basis.
That's funny. How can you do that? I wanted to squirt that.
Yeah, try to get it right in the bowl.
I wanted to squirt it so it would get clean off. Had poop on it.
Otherwise, I've not had access to meat that was raised by my stewardship. And so because of that, Chelsea and I had generally not eaten meat. Like, we don't have access to meat apart from what most people find in the stores. But if you study and learn about how most of our animals are raised and the types of food they are given to raise them and the way that they're slaughtered. Like, I put a video called The Way of Cain in which I talked a little bit more about that. And I challenged people to watch a documentary that was called Dominion, which dealt with the realities of large industrialized meat and animal processing and the nightmares that are involved in it. And Chelsea had this conviction when we were getting beef jerky. And even though it was like organic and grass-fed beef jerky, she had this thought as she was about to eat it that, I don't know if this animal died a violent death, because there's this instructions in the Torah about not eating things that die violently and or things that are torn to pieces, or even in like the New Testament, the renewed covenant, where it talks about not eating food that's been sacrificed to idols or stuff that's got the blood in it or stuff that's been strangled. And you don't know if you don't know where your meat comes from. And that was a big deal. And so we really abstained from eating meat for a while because she was like, I don't know how this animal died. And we had just had a goat that strangled herself because she was ridiculously crazy. And we had her on a lead, like a leash, and she was tied up trying to graze on all of the briars and nightmares in North Carolina. I love North Carolina, one of the promised lands. I loved that place so much, but there's thorns and thistles and briars growing everywhere because the soil was in distress and it was pissed off, and it said, I'm going to produce poison ivy until you all leave me alone. It's effective, unless you have goats. Anyway, she strangled herself by walking into her mom, the other goat's leash, and they wrapped around each other and she strangled her to death. And then the homesteader there at the time, she butchered that goat and was going to feed it to the dogs because that's like biblical dog food, is the blood. The flesh of humans and animals, and like that's biblical dog food, the crumbs that fall from your master's table. If you feed your animals that, it's tremendously good for them. But during that process, we both started having this thought, like, if we don't know where our meat comes from, maybe we shouldn't eat meat. So that's really what we did. When we were on farms and working, we would eat the produce of where we knew it was coming from and what had gone into it.
So all of this is going to go into a pasta sauce that I'm just gonna make quickly over gluten-free noodles. So that's a lot of prep there. We're eating, this was like 6 tomatoes, 3 little eggplants, a couple small zucchini. So that's how much prep is going into almost every meal, and we eat like this 3 times a day. So it's kind of insane, but the amount of prep, but at the same time, like, it's amazing how good we feel eating farm fresh. So
it's really hard to know how many toxins are going into your food, even if it is like certified organic, even if it is, grass fed. Like, there's these other sides to it that make it really unknown. And we had this strong desire to be able to be all up in the business of food production. So that's why we're farmers. We love it so much because we get to know is exactly what went into it. And we have these lambs that are sitting out there all the time, and I want to butcher them. And I had my first butchering experience of one where I slaughtered it and I skinned it and I gutted it. And then, I butchered it mostly with my kukri machete. It's not here. My kukri machete. And because I didn't have a bone saw, and I just assumed, well, let's just take my machete right through those spines, because spines have this soft, spongy bone and it's perfect for chopping. Like, that's what the cleaver's for. And I loved it. Like, I loved it so much, but I really had this desire to learn how to do it properly. So I got to go to this class that was hosted by a family who had a homestead, and they had this desire to butcher their Murano sheep. And they opened up their farm to a gentleman named Brandon Sherd, I believe is his last name. And he has this thing that's called like the Farmstead Meatsmith. And it's his website, I think, farmsteadmeatsmith.com. And he's an artisanal butcher. And he got into it because of this. And this. Oh, hold on, my child is calling upon me. What's up, honey? What's up? You're hungry? Okay, could you give me a minute? I'm doing something right now. But I will come over and help you in just a moment, all right? Is that all right? Okay, thanks. I'll be over in just a minute. Okay. You want to go over there and play a little bit while I'm working on this? Yeah. Okay, I'll see you in a minute, okay? Excuse me. My daughter's hungry. That man's got a lot more children than I do, and his children are always hungry. And if you're a parent, you totally get this. You got to feed those children on a regular basis, and you want to feed them good food because you love them. I know you do, even if they're frustrating, like ridiculously so, and they just make you so frustrated, which is why you should learn to sharpen knives, because it's so relieving of all that stress and that frustration. He learned how to sharpen knives, and not like any kind of way. Like, he learned the old way, like the proper, serious stone way. And I have to be super honest. I have a whole series called The Way of the Blade. And in that series, I talk a lot about knives and edges and practical, tactical uses and stuff like that. And I'm really definitely coming from a background of hunting human beings. And that's a totally different background than what Brandon and butchers are coming from generally.
I had a marble.
You had a marble? Yeah. That's great, honey. That's awesome. he's coming from a totally different background. And he's came from a background where he started working at a butcher shop and started learning the way of the blade and learning how to sharpen steel with stones. Full disclosure, I have a video called Get Edgy. And I talk about this, which is the way I've been sharpening stone, using stones to sharpen my knives for maybe 10 years. This is my original sharp maker, is what this is called. And I used to recommend it like crazy to beginners and to people that didn't know what they were doing. Mine has like almost completely broken down and fallen apart. You can see these like deep gouges from the hundreds of thousands of strokes that I have put into these things over the years. And ceramic rods, which is what these are, aluminosilicate, like yeah, it's basically corundum, like man-made's version of it. It's like aluminum powder. These get clogged super easy when you're sharpening with them. And they, as you can see, it leaves this, some of you, that's gonna make you cringe like crazy. It leaves this like material behind, that's the steel coming off of it. But then it clogs and you have to wash them all the time. And the only way to really wash them is not with paper towels or hands or soap or sponges, is with wet linen. It actually works pretty well to clean these out. They break down over time and the angles get off. You see all that wiggle and that play, and the set angle idea has always throttled me, and they take forever. And it's bothered me, but I've always been undisciplined in that I thought I couldn't learn how to sharpen this way because I'm inconsistent with angles and stuff like this. Well, the whole thing that I got to learn is that you don't have to be that way. And so the first part of this series that I'm going to put out there is Brandon taking us and the family that was there, and about 23 strangers, other friends of his, people that didn't know each other, who had come to the class to see Brandon teach us how to butcher Murano sheep.
Yeah.
But it will. Just cut on the hide, not on the meat. And what this does, and I'll show you on all carcasses here, but it lines you up to be able to fist with a minimum of effort. If you don't have this, if you get too close to the meat, then you're not really going to be able to successfully fist it. You're going to dig into the flesh and the fat with your fist.
Okay.
This keeps you just on the outside of it. So once I've got a nice little flap like that, again, I try to take my hand, make sure I don't have hair or grime on it. And the fisting is you make a fist, and I'm just going to pull on the hide and push towards the flesh. So I'm pulling on the hide with my left hand, and I'm pushing and rolling my fist towards the flesh. And this is how we're really going to earnestly get the hide off. Because if we were knifing it, it would take forever. Can you push my sleeve way up? It's tight, but we can do it. It's a little caked over the years. There we go. And so I'm rolling. I'm gonna go all the way down the back, across the spine, way across it.
So how come you're doing that as opposed to just ripping the whole thing off?
We don't quite have the power. We're gonna fist it until we can rip it off.
Okay.
Yeah.
How to fully slaughter them, skin them, gut them, and then butcher them, and then also to prepare and package the meat. So I'm going to be sharing different portions of that class for the next couple weeks here so that you guys can kind of come along with me on that journey. Obviously, not everybody there has the same convictions as each and every one of us, and that's totally wonderful. Sometimes they may not use the most, lovely language. They're human beings being human beings. Like they're actually living authentically and putting their hands into the things that try to produce food from the soil. Like I want to go from pasture to plate. That's like my big whole goal. Because I want this one. Come here, GB. Because I want Jubilee to be able to experience the world in an incredibly unique way. I want her to live vibrantly and a healthy life. Like I want her to eat. Like she literally comes down here and is like, I'm hungry. How many parents have had those words echo in their ears like on a regular basis? I want to have good food for her, like the best food on the face of the earth. I just want to feed my family exquisite, delicious, nutrient-dense food. And so this was my way of going about doing that. Brandon got there because he learned how to sharpen steel on stones. And so that's what I'm going back to. And I got to hear different people that were at that class that they themselves had changed their lives because they went and learned a discipline. They learned an art. They learned a skill set. And I believe sharpening steel is one of the best things you can ever learn. Like there's this Proverbs, this speaking of wisdom that literally is in Proverbs 27:17. And it says, oh, hold on a second. Let's check it out. Sword check. Ready, GB? Let's find it. Proverbs 27:17. Iron is sharpened by iron, and a man sharpens the face of his friend. Iron doesn't sharpen iron super well. Stone sharpen it super well. But if two dudes got swords in their pockets, and they, like the living word, and they choose to sharpen each other's character and convictions, that is one of the most robust and powerful things. And this class was full of that. Like, we got to talk to each other as butchering and slaughtering was happening. And it just simply changes you. Honey, I know you want to hold that. I'm so enthused that you want to hold that. I'll hold it with you, okay? It changes you. Like, when you are in the presence of an animal that is silent before it shears, sheep are totally different than any other animal that I've seen die. Like, they are silent, and it's unreal.
If your knife isn't sharp, then don't do it this way. It's just a deal killer. Just use the gun, and you know, if you do use the gun, a 22 mag is ideal. 22 WMR.
Yeah.
A long rifle will probably do it. I would still go for like high velocity full metal jacket, just to make sure you get all the way through the skull. Because again, with the gun, it's brain or nothing. Like, you gotta hit brain, or it's not doing anything. You just have an injured sheep at that point, if you don't get brain. So, and I rarely use the gun with sheep. It's almost always the knife. So if you're going to do the knife, then it's really about controlling their body. So they are, it really helps with sheep, with all the things actually, to try to understand their nature. And you can deduce it just by watching them and looking at them and seeing how they act and move and be. And these are prey animals, so their plan for avoiding suffering is flight, for avoiding death. That's it. That is their whole plan, is flight, flee. So if you can actually restrain their flight or prevent them from fleeing at all, you can really control their heart rate, their degree of calmness. If you can control their body, you can control their mind. And so a tiny pen is well worth it. Like, you know, set up at your place. It's a barn stall or something tight, because if they flee, if they find themselves fleeing, that's when they panic. It's because it's reactive. It's not so much they conceive abstractly to panic and then they decide to flee. So if you control their body first, then everything is going to be smoother. They're going to be calmer. And that goes for the whole process. So there's a real particular way to handle their body, you know. Basically, you have to disarm them from fleeing, which means you have to get their 4 feet off the ground. And once they're off the ground, they're just kind of like, hey, that was it. I got nothing else. And so instead of stressing about the injustice of the situation, they kind of surrender. And that's, you know, you find that with all livestock. It's the same thing when you hold a chicken upside down. You know, they just kind of, what's going on? You can hold a piglet upside down and it will stop screaming. You hold it by its back leg. It looks, you know, like cruel, but it's actually not. That's the only way they chill out. When you're, you know, you sell pig, you grab the back leg and you hold them upside down. So if you can manage their body in a way that accords with their nature, then you can maintain the calm. And that really means don't chase them. So corral them when they're calm, try not to chase. And I think of it in terms of, you know, you can kind of read the mood of the herd. And these guys are, you know, they're a little jumpy right now. They're kind of clustering in the opposite corner. And you can tell kind of where they are on a scale of 1 to 10 in terms of how anxious they are. And if you go in there and you grab for one and you miss, they go up several notches on the anxiety scale. And you miss again, they go up again. So the goal is to just try to be as decisive and calm as you can, so you're not chasing, just so there's not chasing going on. And that's the best for the sheep. So what it will look like is I'll get in there and right away, I'm gonna pull the sheep's head up so it's looking straight up to the sky. And that is one way you can kind of sort of arrest their movements that way. You can even shove your thumb in their mouth, in their bottom jaw. You'll see sheep shearers sometimes do that, and you can really, like a sheep that's being sheared actually, they're chill when they're sitting on their butt.
Yeah.
Because their legs aren't on the ground. They're just like, okay, this is it. I have nothing to do about this situation. So they're pretty calm.
They won't bite or anything like that.
Yeah, they're not biters. You just want to be right behind. They only have teeth on the bottom, you know, it's just gums on the top, and you just want to be right behind their bottom teeth. Don't go far back in there because that's where the molars are, and those are sharp. That hurts. But yeah, just right behind if you want to use that method. It's fine for me just you pull their head up, and at least that way they're not jetting, you know. And then I'm actually gonna kind of get on the side of them, and I'm going to hip out and lay them on their side. and then I'm gonna restrain them not with my body weight. So you don't have to have all your buddies crowd around the sheep and hold it down. That actually makes them panic. It's actually just, while they're on their side, I'm just gonna focus on keeping its head on the ground and keeping it tipped. You know what I mean? Tipped so it can't get its feet under it and push up. Rather than just trying to hold it and push it down. That doesn't actually work very well. You just gotta keep them tipped so they can't do this move and get up and put themselves up.
How calm and quiet everything can be when we, as the butchers and the processors, are calm and confident and quiet. The animals were completely calm, and we learned how to kill them in the most humane possible way and capture every bit of the vitality and the resources out of that animal from the start with its blood, which is one of the best possible things we can put into our soils ever, which is why he says, don't eat the blood, but pour it onto the earth and cover it with soil. Like our soil that plant the earth had been giving its life through these plants so that creature could live from the day it was born until the day of its death. And when you return it to the soil, all of those nutrients can produce a greater abundance when we give it back to it. These guys that were there was a couple gals too, mighty women as well. We had this unbelievable bond that took place when we gathered together with a common desire, which was to learn and to grow and to be honest and sincere with each other. And it changed us. Like the moment that animal, when its blood was spilled, the whole entire atmosphere in the room changed. Like in the pen, we were outside in this little pen. Everybody in that room had a totally different perspective. And it was like all of the masks we wear, like the social, I don't know you and it's kind of awkward. We just all met here. All of that stuff went away almost immediately. The second my fingers were in the bowl catching the blood and Brandon was drawing his blade against the neck, there was this release in the air that changed everyone and gave us this sense of unity and of understanding and of confidence and of relatability and of passion, chutzpah, manliness. It was awesome. I needed that so bad. And I know that each and every one of us can have these experiences. And if you're totally against raising and nurturing animals so that you can use them to feed and nourish people, I totally respect that. But there's a lot of people that don't, and they really want to raise chickens. They really want to raise sheep, and you really want to raise cattle, and you want to use them to fuel your farm, to fuel your land, to nourish your soils. Animals were made to co-labor together with us. On day 6, we were all created on the same day with this common goal in mind. And you know what? We can work in harmony together again. And I believe if we will learn the way of the blade, we can get there and we can do it together. And so I want to release to you guys this first video of that. Thank you to each of you who was a part of that class, who was willing for me to have my face all up in the business and filming and recording all of this. I so appreciate it. And I hope each and every one of you, as you watch these videos, that they will help to encourage you to know that you guys can do it too. That there is no reason that we can't be like the priests of old, who were the butchers of society. The Levites and the priesthood, the Kohanim, were the set apart people that were the slaughterers. They were the people that knew the way of the blade intimately. They were the barefooted Linenites who were operating in a kingdom that was feeding and nourishing the people. And when people went to the temple and the tabernacle, those walls and those masks that they wore throughout the rest of their life came down because they had an understanding that there was costs to sin. There was costs to mistakes, that there was regrettable decisions that they had made in their life, that now an innocent and perfect animal was going to die for their choices. Like, these are the consequences of our life. And I want people to come to learn this. I'm going to hold on to this, okay, honey? I want people to have that experiences, because when you commonly come together and you see an animal give its life for that, and then you see that animal get turned into food in front of you, and then you get to break bread and fellowship and eat that together, it's the most bonding and unifying thing I can't even describe. It's something you must personally experience yourself to know what it is I'm talking about. I think there's a lot of people in the hunting culture. I've never gone and hunted animals. I've shot at them, don't get me wrong, but I've never successfully hunted animals with like another man. I've only ever hunted humans. And so I've always had this kind of distancing towards hunting animals. But livestock rearing is a different thing entirely. And I am so satisfied in doing that. And I know this is probably, I'm just scratching the surface of what many of you have already experienced, who've gone and hunted with another person and got to experience that passionate, invigorating satisfaction of eating food that you labored towards. I think it's one of the greatest rewards a man can ever have. And it's one of our greatest weapons to fight against the curse. And these consequences that have happened because of our mistakes and our shortcomings are ratified. Like, we get vindication for our hard labor when we eat our meal in satisfaction. I want you all to eat your bread in satisfaction. And I thank each and every one of you who has supported and encouraged us. And to all of you who have been patiently waiting for the Linen Railroad and for the ministry packages to get sent out. It's the first time in like 2.5 months, Chelsea and I were actually able to collect enough linen and wool and silk and treasure bags to be able to send them out. And so I think there's dozens of humans who are about to receive some super awesome gifts. Obviously, I'd like to get to where I can put blades in there. I am working right now on being able to start including the Hallelujah Scriptures parallel Bible in there for those of you that don't have the word, that would like it and would like to learn what Yahuwah said, the language. Like, I'm trying to learn Hebrew because I want to know what my father said, because I think that's the ultimate sword. That's the ultimate way I can sharpen my edge, is to learn the scripture and to learn his language. And so we're going to try to be putting together in our Linen Railroad packages the sword of the covenant so that you guys can learn alongside with us. I love you all. Thank you so much for taking the time to learn the ways of the blade. I pray that his word would satisfy you and that he would fill you with an overwhelming sense and a hunger for him, that you can know him more. I look forward to talking to you all soon.